Hey, welcome you guys. Before we get going, can we please give me in the chat just what you teach, grade level, subject area, just to kind of get a gauge of what everybody's teaching and where this lesson might fit into what you guys have going on. Kind of guide discussion a little bit here before we get started.
So maybe while you guys are doing that, I could go ahead and talk about OKAGE a little bit and introduce Cody, who's our speaker today. Thank you so much, you guys, for joining us today. My name is Becca Castleberry, and I'm the director of the Oklahoma Alliance for Geographic Education. If you're not already familiar with OKAGE, we do K-12 professional development and outreach for geography and social studies teachers all over the state. Really excited for this session today. We have Cody Sivertsen speaking, who is going to be sharing his lesson plan on the spread of democracy and authoritarianism around the world. So I'm sure there will be an opportunity for some really interesting discussion following Cody's presentation. Cody currently teaches 7th grade social studies at Kenneth Cooper Middle School in the Putnam City School District, and he's a National Geographic Certified Educator. He was also recently named a Putnam City Excellent Educator for the 2019-20 school year. We're really honored and excited to have Cody involved with OKAGE. So thank you so much for being here this afternoon. And I guess whenever you're ready, we'll get started. But yeah, welcome, Cody.
Yeah, thanks, guys. So first off, to get things going, my lesson is about the rise of democracy and of authoritarianism globally. With our subject area that I teach, Eastern Hemisphere geography, it's a mix of current events, but also some historical context. I mix a lot of that in here. And another thing is, in social studies, we're really pushing towards that inquiry-based model, right? Really getting the kids the hands-on learning, where you push the kind of push the responsibility off to them. And this approach that I use in this lesson is, so to backtrack a little bit, I wrestled in college all the way from the time I was little all the way up through college, and my college wrestling coach always said, like, the best coaches are people who steal bits and pieces from all the other coaches they meet. And I think that definitely applies in the classroom. This approach is kind of piecing together a lot of different inquiry models that I've learned about throughout the last few years. And so without any further ado, I'll go ahead and share my screen. And what I'm going to do here, sorry, this may not. Okay, is the PowerPoint up now? Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, so it is about the rise of democracy and authoritarianism. I'm going to be going back and forth a little bit between the PowerPoint slide, or the Google slide that I use throughout the 4 days of this presentation, and I'll backtrack to a couple supporting documents. So first off, this is about the rise of democracy and authoritarianism, incredibly relevant, especially what I found while developing this, especially in the times of COVID-19, and that becomes very relevant within this lesson plan. Before I get going, if you'd like to jot down my email there, just for if you want to message me any questions after the fact. And I'll also go ahead and put it in the chat there. right. So the essential question here, because with any inquiry-based lessons or series of lessons, the biggest deal is establishing that essential question with the students. What I always do is I'll post it on the board. I'll make sure it's in several slides. If I'm having a visual aid like a PowerPoint, I'll make sure it's available to the students very frequently, because they need to know that this is the question that by the end of these few days lessons, they're answering this question, okay? And our question here, what government system out of democracy and authoritarianism has gone more viral? Which one is more widespread? And here's the layout of the lesson. So day one is a more note-taking style day. That's your standard direct instruction. And what I've learned over the years that is most effective for me is starting out with more of the scaffolding piece, starting out with the piece where I'm teaching the students more directly, and then slowly passing the responsibility off to the students, especially for your seventh graders. That's why I teach is the seventh grade kids. If you're more new to inquiry-based learning or teaching rather, you may be a little bit more controlled than what I do here. And if you teach more high school and the students have more experience with this, you may be a little bit more loose. And I'll explain that as I go. So day two for me is a document analysis. So they take the notes on day one. Day two, they're really digging into the documents. On day three, the students will write their own claim, their own argument for this essential question. And then by day four, they're actually making an argument in a debate format. So kids go all the way from day one, you're establishing the content, all the way to day four, where they're establishing that higher level learning, informing their own opinion. So really getting involved with the content. So when I kick off this first lesson, I do it with the think, pair, share strategy. And on this, and I probably don't need to go through every single individual strategy I use, but I just want to establish with this strategy, what do they know about the two government systems? So usually you'd probably do this lesson later in the year once they have a little foundation of the two. So you've taught a little bit about democracy, you've taught a little bit about authoritarianism, so they at least understand the differences. So what you're doing here is putting the kids' minds together and just seeing what they know. So if you're not familiar with Think, Pair, Share, they take a moment to think on their own about the concept. Following that, they'll pair up with a partner and kind of collaborate with one another on an answer. And then finally, take a few groups to share with one another and share with the class. And, excuse me. So you establish what they know about democracy. And this is just the instructions again over here on the right. So what do you know about democracy? Pass it off to the kids. Give them a moment to figure out what they know about democracy. And then from here, give a quick refresher. And if this is earlier in your school year, this may be part of your note-taking day. This may be something that they write down in their notes. Government giving power to the people, citizens having rights such as voting, and so on down the line. But it's kind of an interesting thing. I made this lesson plan, and I've been more or less teaching to this lesson the past few days. So I have taught democracy and authoritarianism previously. So there was no reason for the kids to write this down now, because by now they're very proficient in the differences. So if you're new to teaching democracy in the year, this may be part of the notes for the day, but otherwise just kind of pass through it. Hey, here's a refresher. Make sure your kids are all on the same page. And then I do the same thing with authoritarianism. So think, pair, share, and then a refresher. So government where one person or a few people are making all of your decisions. So, and that's just getting the kids up to date. You know that they're ready to go. You know that they know what democracy is. They know what authoritarianism is. And from here, I jump into my notes. I use Cornell style note taking, and I'm not sure if this is a true Cornell note style, but I know it was adapted through myself and a former PLC partner. And I always walk them through how to set up their page. And so this is how I have my students set up their notes. I think teaching note taking is a skill, and it's something that even though they're in 7th grade now, they start this note taking now and they can carry it all the way through high school or college. And so in my slides, you'll see in a second, my slides actually kind of, I format my slides in a way that mimics Cornell note taking. You'll see that in a second. So I tell them to put the topic up at the top here, the rise of democracy and authoritarianism, and insert the date in the upper right-hand corner. Directly under that, the essential question, what the notes are going to answer, what has caused the rise of both the democratic and authoritarian systems in recent times. And then with the rest of the Cornell notes, I prompt them to, over on the left-hand side, that's where they put their topic headers. So I'll show you in a second here, but all of my slide headings here, I'll prompt them to write on the left-hand side, and then their summary of the notes will go on the right-hand side. So that's kind of how they split it up. Nice and organized. The kids end up loving it later. They despise it early in the year, but later in the year, when they have a nice organized notebook where they can easily find all the topics we've taken notes on, they love it. So they'll see, oh, okay, I took notes on factors that contributed to the rise of democracy. So that's how I lay out Cornell notes. I don't know if that's traditional Cornell note-taking style, but that's how my students take them. And so I'm not going to sit here and read the slides to you guys, but my first slide is about kind of giving the more stereotypical rise of democracy story. So I give you 3 different examples here of where democracies have risen up and established themselves in more recent years. So you see Tunisia and Arab Spring, Sudan following the conflict in Darfur, and then South Africa and apartheid. And one thing I did here is I linked little video clips, little short couple-minute video clips. These are 3 different countries that I've talked about in class this year because it's within my content. But if they were to be countries that your students know nothing about, have no background knowledge on, you could easily click these links, give a quick refresher, and then the students can kind of piece this together. Okay, there's this kind of story of citizens are oppressed, people rise up, and then they push for a democratic system to be established. So you kind of create that story. And that's one thing that I did in class today was the kids, by the time they left, they understood that story of, oh, okay, people are oppressed. they rise up, they protest, and then they want to establish democracy. So, you guys are, you understand, tell a story with it, the kids love it. So that's the story told with this slide. And one thing I didn't mention there is between slides of notes, how I organize them. So this little box here, slides one header would go on the left-hand side here. And the bullet points would go over here, their summary of them. And then between slides, I have students draw a horizontal line to separate them. So at the end of the slides, the end of the note-taking day, they have nice organized sections for their notes. Little political cartoon. This is about Tunisia, Arab Spring uprising. And what I usually do on note-taking days is have little breaks. So sit with the kids and just analyze them. For political cartoons, I use the tacos method to break down political cartoons. And by this time in the year, the kids are familiar with that. So I would kind of roll through time, action, caption, objects, and then summarize the political cartoon. But use what your kids are familiar with. And then I do the same thing with authoritarianism. So what are factors that have led to authoritarianism rising up? And once again, just establish that story. So a trend that I find is authoritarianism is established when a government system or a people group are more, they're vulnerable, whether it be economic downturn, warfare, and then the scenario that I come back to here over and over again is, or a pandemic. Okay. Whenever I talked about this in class today, the kids loved it. They're like, oh, I heard about this. I heard about that with such and such leader. Because this is something that, has put our society at a total freeze, a total standstill in ways. So the kids love talking about COVID and what they've heard. And so my big example here was certain countries that have taken advantage of the pandemic, and the leaders have used that as a way to take a firmer grasp of power. So these were the three examples that I used. Once again, put a couple links of specific examples of that. And then finally, so this is my third and final slide for the day. Which system is more suited for a pandemic / emergency? And use some information from the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, and talked about the factors that they proved or hypothesized to be relevant in dealing with a pandemic. And when I have these kids taking the notes, there's a lot of text on the slide, and I tell them that this is a lot of text. But I'd urge them to put this in much more shortened examples, put it in your own words, give a summary, okay? So, and some of the things that the Carnegie Endowment came up with is trust in the government, be it democracy or authoritarianism. Trust in the government helps the country deal with a pandemic, as well as the government's ability to carry out decision making. Once again, like that political cartoon, this is a more lengthy quote from President Orban of Hungary, and this is an explanation of a moment where their parliament came and they voted for him to get, for an indefinite time period, absolute government control. So it didn't last for a long time, but just giving them a snapshot of something that's truly going on. That's something that, as seventh graders, pushing them to actually see, real life events, things that are going on. The kids, they really soak it in. And then this is how I end my day here. An exit ticket, write on a note card. And for me, the significance of giving them like a note card, is it something they can hang on to for the next couple of days? So they end this class period and just two simple questions. What is a democracy? What is authoritarianism? And give an example with your definition. And what that does is for the next 3 days, as they're continuing on with this more inquiry-based lesson sequence, is, they're, for my kids and for many of yours, I looked at our group here. We've got, some of us have middle school kids, some of us deal with elementary age. And if they're dealing with these concepts that, maybe this is the first year they've ever heard of authoritarianism, by tomorrow they may forget, even though they've been learning about it all year. They may not remember tomorrow. And so for them to have a little cheat sheet of, authoritarianism, one or a few leaders have all the power. Oh, okay. Turkmenistan was an example. And same thing with democracy. It's good for them to have something in front of them as they continue to work. Before I move on to the next day, does anybody have any questions? You can put it in the chat, or just come off mute. It's fine.
I just had one.
Yeah.
Blevins here. Will this PowerPoint be shared with us?
Yeah, I can share with you guys, or Becca.
Yeah, it'll be on the OKAGE website. I'll drop that link in the chat for you guys.
Well, I'm a first-year teacher, so this has been like really good so far, and this would be great as like a resource just to have something to go.
I'll make sure that I send the link out to everyone so you guys will be able to download it.
Thank you.
Good. Yeah.
Awesome, cool. And okay, so next day, this is day 2. So first day, you have your note taking. I like to start out with that way because I have 7th graders. Baby steps. You establish that content. Here's where I start to push it off to them, push the responsibility off to them. And there can be some variation here, and I will explain that along the way. So first off, another political cartoon. This is obviously of Putin, and it's pretty simple. The concept here, the idea here. And I remind them of, here's the way we look at a political cartoon. And like I said, there are tons of different ways to break them down. I think this is the easiest, the most cut and dry, but there are other acronyms that are widely used as well. So the second day is the document analysis. So this is the kids actually getting into the documents. This is their evidence for their argument. And so overall, this is what I have them do with the documents. So I actually, like I said, I did this today in class. Because of where my students are at, I was able to give a quick overview of my different examples from the note-taking day. I didn't have the kids take the notes, and then I had enough time for the kids to actually go through a document. Just one, but based on the time you have in class and the experience of your kids, you can do this several different ways. So I'm going to have the kids look at these documents, and when they get to each document, I want them to establish a main idea. So they can underline it, highlight it, circle it, star it, whatever works for them. And then I have a few guiding questions for each document as well. So let me, I'm gonna try to figure out to get to, I don't know if this will be a very good transition, so let's see. This is in the way. Okay, I don't know. Did it change to the doc? Or is it still on the PowerPoint? Okay, thank you. Awesome. So here's what I'm going to put in front of the kids. And so this is your documents. It's got the exact same instructions from the PowerPoint. Analyze the documents to build your evidence. And I put that essential question up there again. Which government system has gone more viral? And when they get to each document, begin by identifying a main idea and then answer these questions, because I put some guiding questions in here for each document. So what this does is, if your kids are more, they have some background in doing document analysis, you've been doing it for months now, they may be able to go in and answer these questions and say, okay, I can understand this document. Now, this year, because of COVID and virtual learning, my kids haven't been able to do a lot of document analysis. So I kind of held their hand and walked them through the documents today. So it really just depends on where you're at as far as teaching primary documents and where your students are at with working through them. So as far as these 4 documents are concerned, you've got one, it's a tweet, and it references back to what you would have talked about the day before with the Hungarian parliament giving the prime minister unlimited power. And a lot of kids like looking at stuff like this. It's a tweet. It's something that's very digestible to them because it's something that oftentimes they look at on a regular basis. And I've got some guiding questions to kind of help them get the main idea. And what every document ends with is this evidence for authoritarianism or democracy going viral, and why? So by number 3, they're giving you the main idea. And what you end up with here is 4 documents. 2 of them are, so you get the tweet here, that's evidence of authoritarianism. This document 2, this is a reference to Arab Spring and the use of social media. So that's an evidence of democracy going viral. And then 2 more, they're more challenging, more lengthy quotes, excerpts. The first one about authoritarianism, and then the other one about democracy. And there are a lot of different ways that you can do this. And so what I ended up doing today was I kind of let the kids look at the pictures on their own. And then I went through the documents with them, the excerpts, the quotes, just because, like I said, my kids are babies when it comes to this. They're really in the beginning stages. They're real green when it comes to document analysis. If it were to be at the very end of previous years, I might let them work through all documents on their own. You can also group them up. You can have them work individually. You can go through all of them together and kind of show them how to pick out main ideas, how to find evidence, but that's all based on, like I said, their experiences. So, and then on the board here, after I have the kids work, I like to always go through the documents with them because, whenever it comes to primary sources, some of them are challenging. Some things you might give to the kid and it might be the first time you've seen a kid work with it. And sometimes they come up with stuff that you're like, wow, I had no idea that that's something that a 7th grader would pull from this, but kids can surprise us. So go through the 4 documents, just make sure that they come up with a solid main idea and evidence. And then here's the last thing that I do for this day is I want the kid to just pick one of the documents that they found good evidence for and pick which side of the argument that they would like to be on. Okay, do you think that democracy is going more viral or authoritarianism? So find evidence, find a document and pick a side. Okay, so that's my end of, day 2. Once again, guys, any questions on that for day 2 for your document analysis? Okay, and one thing is if you were to be like virtual, or you're really constricted with doing an A/B schedule, if you're, you really want to do inquiry based, but you're like, I'm on a time crunch, or, my kids are, not going to have enough time for this. You could cut these documents in half and just give them one and say, okay, we're going to talk about how democracy is on the rise. Just give them half the document, or just give them one and say, pick a main idea and you can write a claim about it. And this can all be done in one class period. That's one thing that, if I find a topic and I'm like, the kids really need a primary document on this, it's a very, polarizing topic and the kids would love to form an opinion on it, I'll give them a super simple doc. It may be a real quick short excerpt of something. And I'll say, hey, pull out some evidence and write an argument about it. And you can get all that done in one class period. Awesome. So yeah, any questions about day 2 of that? Okay. So when I step in for day 3, I want to give a quick refresher, just because day to day, like I said, my 7th graders sometimes, they just won't remember stuff. So I like to get my kids up and moving around the room. They love it as well. So I'll come in, and these are just a quick list of scenarios. What government system, democracy or authoritarian, best corresponds with the scenario? So, and I'll just go one at a time. Boom, 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 boom. And just go through the situations. And usually when I do this, I'll have the kids, kind of move back and forth across the room, and sorry, checking out the chat. So moving across the room, and every time, just have one kid say, okay, give me an explanation of why this is democracy. Give me an explanation of why this is authoritarianism. Just to get the kids moving, get the kids thinking, back on topic. And Clayton, you're killing me, man. Clayton messaged me. Okay. So day 3, write a claim. This is where they take what they got yesterday with the documents. They got the evidence. Day 3, they're going to write a claim, and they're preparing for a debate. My students always have a love-hate relationship with debates, because I do them on a regular basis. They know the format, they know the deal. A lot of times I'll do debates against my PLC partners classes. And so every time I say, hey, we're having a debate, they'll be like, oh, are we doing it in class, or are we, doing it with Mr. Beagle's class? And so that's always a fun deal. So once again, I put the question on the board: which government system has gone more viral? Which one is more widespread? And I lay it out for them. This is their I believe statement. This is their claim. So they're bringing evidence from their documents from yesterday. We've went over the documents. They maybe worked in a group, they maybe worked as an individual, but by this time we know the kids understand the documents. And I just give them a little refresher so they can have this as a point of reference on the board. Okay, 2 and 4, those are documents if you chose democracy. 1 and 3, those are your pieces of evidence if you're doing authoritarianism. And I want you to have evidence, and I want you to have some additional commentary. And then I like to give them a little starter sentence. I believe democracy or authoritarianism has gone more viral as of late because And then give me your evidence, give me your little additional commentary. Now, I found over the years, some kids will have this done in 30 seconds. And some kids, it will take an entire hour to write. And, this isn't a dissertation. This is a couple sentences, 2 to 3, 4 sentences. Some kids will take a whole hour to write it. And so I found over time is to give the kids that finish real quick a little bit of extra, a little bit of a way to strengthen their argument. So as kids start to get done, I put them into pairs. And what they do is start to draft up some hypothetical back and forth for their argument. So I say, okay, you wrote your claim that democracy has gone viral. Well, what are the other people going to say about that? They might say, well, I think authoritarianism has gone more viral because of, X, Y, Z reasons. I want you to start to look at what do you think the other people are going to say, and how are you going to argue that statement? So they like to kind of go back and forth, and they'll practice their debate skills, and they'll be doing this at the same time as other people who are just writing their claim. And so that's kind of how for your SPED students versus your honors type of students, I have them all in the same classroom. So things have to be a little bit leveled for them. And this is my solution to that issue. And so that's kind of what I need to see from my students on day 3 before they get out the door. And for some of you, this may be where you cut it. It could be a 3-day lesson plan. If your students haven't done any inquiry-based stuff, that may take 4 days for you. So that is my 3rd day. Does anybody have any questions on that? Once again, you can come off mute, or you can just put it in the chat. All right. And my last day is the most straightforward, I think, but it's your debate day. And there are a lot of ways that you can structure this, but this is the most, once again, I talked about stealing ideas from different people. I got this from a former English teacher at my school. And it's very good, very middle school friendly, because you don't want to, for middle school, it's hard to have those open discussions where everybody can talk, because you're not going to get everybody involved, and it might get a little bit unruly. So, because some kids are going to be super fired up and they're going to want to talk every time. So this is a way to get everybody involved, but it's also very structured. So I'll put kids in already prepared groups of 3 to 5 maybe. And I'll sit them down at the beginning of class and I'll say, okay, you have 5 minutes to kind of rehash your arguments. Some kids will just have a claim, and other kids will have, a little bit of that back and forth that I had them prepare. And then I'll give them the flow of the debate. So start out, the kids are going to line up in front of the room. So it kind of looks like this. So one hand is one side of the argument, and the kids will be lined up. And then on the other hand, this is the other side of the debate, and the kids will be lined up and they'll be facing each other. And then I'll be in the middle. And so I'll say, okay, you guys are democracy. You guys are authoritarianism. Person in the front of the line for democracy, give your claim. And these kids are 7th graders. If they step up there, they're going to forget their argument and they're just going to freeze up. I let them bring their sheet to the front of the room, read it off the sheet if they choose to. By the end of the year, they will be better, won't have to do that. At the beginning of the year, they may have to just read it. So I'll have them read their argument, and then I'll say, okay, other side, authoritarianism. How do you, what's your counter argument to that, that democracy argument? and they'll give their counter argument. And the benefit of having, these two groups is if the person in the front of the line totally freezes up, they're like, I don't even know what that means. They can turn back to their group and they can have a little quick discussion. And then, they'll turn around and argue back to them. And then once this person in the front of this line has a chance to respond, I have these two people in the front circle back to the back of the line. And then the people in the front, then we'll start with authoritarianism. And then the democracy person will respond. Authoritarianism will have a rebuttal. Then they circle to the back of the line. So it gets everybody involved, but they also have their peers to help them if they freeze up. So does that make sense? I feel like I should have drawn a diagram, but yeah, it's very structured. The kids have their peers to lean on, and hopefully this little explanation of it also helps. If anybody needs to email me and we need to talk that out, someone wants to do that debate format, we can definitely do that. Okay, and then I'll just have the debate. I put a rubric for how I would grade the debate. And Becca will share that with right, Becca, that'll be in the package with the lesson plan. Okay, cool.
Yeah, it'll have everything. Yeah.
Awesome. And then this isn't complex or anything, but it gives from the Pew Research Center really the evidence of behind this whole thing, because especially in the time of COVID, you've seen a lot of different authoritarian regimes kind of grasp at more power, but truly what's stood the test of time is democracy trending upward, where more autocratic type of government systems are trending downward, and then you get the mixed somewhere in between. So, but 57% of countries are democratic. So you kind of establish this is the true evidence of it, and have a little bit of discussion there. One real relevant extension, so kind of a fifth day, if you will, or a sixth day of this, if you really have a lot of good time, is giving the kids and I didn't really hash this out in a real detailed fashion, but a good extension activity would be having kids just look at the data of how authoritarian versus democratic countries have handled the coronavirus. And, you'll get a lot of different things here. So with most grade levels, with seventh grade especially, it's going to need to be a little bit more structured than go to this website and do some research. But this would be a good starting point for you guys if you wanted to take this a step further. Okay, so that's the progression that I often take there. Note-taking day, document analysis, write your claim, and then day 4 being a debate day. So that is my progression of the rise of democracies and authoritarian regimes. Here is my email. So that's all I've got, guys.
Yeah, thank you so much, Cody. Well, I guess we've got some time for some questions and discussion. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or unmute yourself, and we will go over those.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess while people are thinking of questions, I was thinking of one as you were talking. So you had talked some about the transition between a democracy and an authoritarian government. I wonder if you could talk more about when do you know? I feel like it maybe is kind of like a not so black and white for a lot of situations. So it's just I'm kind of curious about what your opinion is about that. When do you know that you've changed to a different kind?
Yeah. And I saw a lot of, different stuff, especially looking at it, into diving deeper into this and looking at the research, looking at the the different resources out there and all the different experts in the field talking on this. I think it's really a scale, because you get democratic governments, and that's one thing when I talk to my kids today. So I'm not going to have like a cut and dry answer for you, but I think one thing whenever I talk to my kids today is it's definitely a scale, because whenever you look at like the Hungarian prime minister, for a short period of time getting total control of the government, well, on paper, that's a democracy. But yet their parliament voted to give one figure total control. On paper, Russia's a democracy. So really it's a scale there. Whenever I teach this to my students, I say, okay, you have to look at, what the government system is on paper and then what it looks like in practice. So one of the big observations I have my students make is, what kind of rights do the people have? Are those rights just written within their constitution, or unwritten constitution, or are they actually played out? So I know that's not a real true answer to your question, but that's kind of how I teach it to my students, is that it's a scale. You get more democratic countries, you get more authoritarian countries, and then you get some in the middle. And those are factors I have my students look at.
Well, and I think that's a really important point, that they recognize that it's not super black and white, that it is kind of like a spectrum, I guess. But I'm curious what your class has thought of the events at the Capitol last week. Have they been concerned? Have they been, I don't know, I'm just curious like how they've reacted, especially given this lesson plan.
Sure. Actually, it's kind of funny, because especially with seventh graders, because seventh graders, you get a lot of kids that they think they're grown adults, and they have very complex thinking, but you have some kids whose thinking is much more childish. And so, and this year, I think I'm somewhere in between as far as the group I've got, because I had, that was on Wednesday of last week, I believe. And so on Thursday, I had one student who was like, "Hey, can we talk about what happened yesterday?" And I was like, "Yeah, let's have the conversation." And, it was kind of interesting because it was kind of a one-on-one conversation. And I actually had another student who was like, "What is she talking about?" So I think my students understanding it, it's very base level. They are concerned. They want to talk about it, but they're not really engaged as much as past groups of students that I have would have been. So they're just not really interested. And I bet, if you ask all the teachers here, I bet you'd get, we got 15 people, you'd probably get 15 different answers as far as their engagement, because my students really aren't engaging with it.
Yeah. Just curious how they've reacted, or if they've, had any questions about that. But thank you.
You're welcome.
Does anyone else in the group have questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I really
Anyone
like your. Sorry.
I'm just kidding.
I know. I like your idea of lining the kids up and then having them circle back around, just so that everyone has an opportunity to speak. But as you know, teaching seventh grade, some kids don't want to speak. So do you have, like, is there some sort of magic wand that you have that can fix that situation, or?
Yeah. So a lot of it that what I do, because I do several debates throughout the year, is I start real basic with giving kids a lot of different speaking opportunities in the room. And what I'll end up doing, because it's, it's a whole class debate, right? So a lot of kids are getting involved. And what I usually figure out is if there's one kid who, because you have those students who are deathly shy, and you can easily identify those. I'll have those kids do like a one-on-one with me. But for me, I have about 100 students each year. It's usually one. Most students, I talk them into it. And that's one big thing where I have the kids, I let them bring their sheet up with them with their argument. And I say, you read that word for word. That's your argument. We prepared for it in class. And other students, they want to go off the cuff and they don't want their information in front of them. But I like to do a one-on-one with kids.
So then when you're doing the actual debate, do you allow those students to opt out of it at that point, and then you just catch up with them later?
Yeah, I have the discussion with the kids beforehand.
Okay.
And I say, here's what we're going to do. Okay. You're going to come in during such and such hour, or you're going to come in at lunch, and we're going to get it done then. And then we'll just kind of hash out their argument, and I'll throw some hypotheticals at them. And then that'll be that, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. And then, move on.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we still have a few more minutes. Does anyone else in the audience have any questions for Cody or any comments, or maybe an idea of how you would take this into your classroom, modify it for your group, anything like that that you might want to share with the audience?
I had a quick question.
Yeah.
Our school population has a really big EL population. Do you have any advice or tips or tricks you do to modify assignments to get them more involved? I have several students who don't understand any English, so it's been a little harder for them to grasp a lot of the concepts we're covering with our curriculum so far.
Yeah. I may not have, because I don't have that similar population, but that would be a situation where that student would maybe get a political cartoon, something that they can just see where they don't have to necessarily read it, or give them maybe 2 sentences and have them pick out the part of that that's their evidence. So much more shortened, condensed, and then work with your EL, I don't even know, specialist to maybe give them the text in their first language. Would be a good idea as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions from anyone? Okay, well, we have a couple more minutes, so I guess what we'll do is I'll go ahead and do the door prize drawing, and I'll go over a little more information about OKAGE for you guys, just in case you guys aren't super familiar with what we do. So I'm going to be dropping some things in the chat for you guys to look at. So first off, Cody's lesson is going to be available on our website, and I'll give you guys that link in the chat so you guys can download all of his presentation materials, the lesson plan file, and the other documents with that. So that's all ready to go. We are going to be having another session next month. We do our sessions on the second Tuesday at 4 o'clock. We did it 4:30 today. It was different because of the OCSS conference, but next month we'll be back to our usual schedule, and here's that information for you guys in case you would like to log into our next session. And we also have our giant maps available to check out. So if you would like to reserve one of our giant maps, to use in your class this semester. We have maps of Africa, Asia, Europe, North America, and Oklahoma. If you want to reserve one of those, just visit our website, or you can just email me, and we will set up a time for you guys to use them. And if you're not already an OKAGE member, I will give you the link to sign up to be a member if you're interested in receiving all of our updates. And we're also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and I've got all of the links there for you guys. So you'll see more frequent updates on our social media than you will get emails. Oh yeah, so someone had a question about the maps. If they picked up or if they're mailed. We will either bring them to your school depending on where you are, or we'll ship them to you. So if you're in the OKC Norman metro area, we'll usually just bring it to you. But if you're outside of that, then we'll ship them. Yeah, good question. All right, so we're gonna do the door prize drawing for 5 Nystrom desk atlases.
Hey,
And-
Becca.
Oh yeah, sure.
I was going to give an idea. So I used to work in Putnam City where Cody works and where Clayton used to work. And there's a wonderful teacher there named Candy who worked with a lot of EL students. And she once let them draw their argument out. And when I just happened to be there with her working on a project, and so they were talking about Cold War, what does that mean? And the student drew a perfect picture that illustrated exactly what we meant by Cold War. He just didn't have the English skills to write it for her. So if that's an option for you, and I liked Cody's idea of using the cartoons for them, if you can use photos and cartoons and things where they can have some, you know, the language isn't the barrier, maybe that would help you out. But I know she had him draw, and even though he wasn't writing like the other students, he had it. She could tell right away. And so that was a way to kind of help him with his English skills.
Yeah, thanks, Brenda. Really good information. Awesome. Does anyone else have any comments or any final questions before I do the door prize drawing? Okay, so we're gonna do a drawing for 5 Nystrom desk atlases, and the drawing winner was Amy. So I think that's Amy Walls in Putnam City. So Amy, if you're here, could you just type in the chat that you know that you're getting them? Awesome, okay, good deal. Well, we'll send those to you. That's all I have for you guys. Thank you for coming, and thank you again to Cody for preparing this lesson and sharing his ideas with you guys. Hope everyone has a nice evening, and feel free to email me if you have any questions about OKAGE or if there's anything at all we can help with.
Don't forget, we still have 2 more Tuesdays with lots of great sessions. So check it out and join us next Tuesday at 4:30, same time. And if you look at the conference program, you can find all the Zoom links for next Tuesday.
Yeah, thanks, Brenda. And thanks again to everyone for being here.